Hello, students, and welcome to another lesson on contingency tables. This time we're going to use Microsoft Excel. So it's the technology piece of um, the probability section that we just went over, looking at contingency tables and trying to figure out how do we relate one variable to another. So we're going to get started here. If we want to do a comparison of qualitative variables in Excel, we can create these things called pivot tables. And that's going to be the point of this video lecture today. So what we do is we're going to open up the data file that we're interested in this. I made up this data set to be students at Ostos, and it has the degree program that they're enrolled in, student status and ethnicity. And the ethnicity are the demographic options assigned by CUNY. So that's what's listed here. Again, gender is also, these are the options that CUNY has in the CUNY student data book that we talked about. And semester, I made up some semesters and some courses that students might take in a given semester. So this is the fake data set that we're working with to look at some aspects of students that maybe we want to relate to each other. So what we're going to do is we start off with this file. We ensure that the data is what we know as clean. So if we scroll up and down, we look for any missing values, we look for any typos, we look for any issues that might crop up. Some of those issues you'll discover as you do analysis, that maybe there's one blank space that you don't catch, or maybe there's part-time is missing a letter, so that one wouldn't be caught by the total. And you can always check to ensure that you have all of the students in the data set by knowing how many are in the file. At the very bottom, we have row 30 here. If you go to the top, remember the first one has headers. So instead of actually having 30 students, we have 29, right? It would be one less than the number of rows, which can be confusing, but this top one is not a student. So we have 29 students here, and we'll see that number pop up in the totals very soon. All right, so what we can do is we're going to select this data. And what we can do is we grab the upper left, which is A1. And you could either just select all the columns. I like to ensure that I only select the data I'm interested in case there's anything lower down. If there's anything written down here and I select a column, it'll select all of that. And who knows what else is below the data set. If you know that this is just the data set, then you can select it that way. But a safe way of doing it is grabbing here, and you can just drag and drop to the other corner if it's a small enough data set. Or the other thing you might do, which might be easier in cases of big data sets, so you could drag that way. Or in a big data set, it's usually easier to start in this corner, and then you're going to scroll all the way up to the other corner because it'll automatically stop because this is the top. So usually dragging from reverse will help you highlight your data more easily, and then you know you have all the data selected. So once that's done, what you're going to do is you're going to go to Insert, and this is where you can get the pivot table. So once you hit Insert, you're going to select, there's over in the upper left corner here where my cursor is, it says Pivot Table, P-I-V-O-T table. You're going to click on that, and it's going to ask this question. This is why we already selected the data. If not, you'd have to select it here. But this says sheet 1, A1 to F30, which means here's sheet 1. You can see the tab goes from A1 all the way down to F30. That's the correct range. And we're going to put it in a new worksheet. What that does is it opens up another tab so we don't put it on top of the data that we have here or in this file over here, because then it's hard to look at. It's much easier having a different location altogether. So that's the aspect of creating a pivot table. You hit OK. And that brings you to this screen, right? Now, this screen is where a lot of the fun part can happen. So here we have a pivot table that'll pop up as we play around with the data. Over on the right, you'll see some variable names that should look very familiar. If you scroll up and down, you'll see degree program, student status, ethnicity, gender, semester, course. All of these were the variables that are our headers. So if you look here in sheet 1, our headers are those variables. So in sheet 2, we can play around with these. Now, the values down in the lower right are things we want to count. So what we can do is we can grab our degree program because we want to count the degree program. You click and you can drag it to here, and it'll say count of degree. So it's going to count the degree programs, and it says 29. So as you might note, that 29, let me make it a little bigger here. There we go. That 29 represents the number of students that we counted. So that means every student has a degree program list. This is what I meant when I said check to see if your total matches. This is a safe way to do it. But this is not useful, right? This doesn't give us a count of the degree programs, and that's what we wanted. Well, we have to specify to Excel that we want to list them out. This just counts how many there are total. If we want them to list it out, we're going to need to pick that variable, degree program, and put it in rows. And what this does is it assigns each degree program to a row, and then the count goes on the right side. So there are 9 liberal arts in that data set if we went to count, and the other ones are listed as follows. So this is where you can get a quick listing of the degree programs that are in the other file, and it puts them in alphabetical order for you, which is really nice. All right, suppose we want to expand this and know, okay, so we have degree programs. What else can we know about students in those degree programs? Well, what we could do is we could ask about student status. So does a degree program and student status relate to each other? And how would we know? We would come over here to our variables, and we need to drop this somewhere to count it as well. And we haven't utilized columns yet. So contingency tables have here the rows. See, all these rows have different names. And the contingency tables we talked about in stats also had columns. Well, here we have rows, so we just need some columns. So if we grab student status and drop it into columns, we immediately get the totals for full-time and part-time, and we get our grand total for all of the ones in the different degree programs. We also get what we want, which is the grand total for each of the student status values, right? Full-time, there's 11, part-time, there's 18 in this fake data set. Suppose we've lost interest and student status isn't very interesting from this analysis. If you want to get rid of a variable, you can click it in the location that you had dropped it and drag it back up to there, and it'll unselect it, and it'll put it back in the list of choices that you could drag from later. You can also click here in columns, and if you check off what you're interested in, let's say ethnicity, actually, you have to drag it. It has to go there. So you just drag and drop the variables as you need them to where you want them. So let me do that again. If we have ethnicity that we're interested in, we can drag it and drop it into columns. And that's the easiest way to play around with the pivot tables. So here now we have our list of different ethnicities. We could also get rid of that. We could add in gender. So you can get a lot of quick frequencies and contingency tables relating to different variables in this way. Let me do one example again. So we're going to get rid of all of these variables. And suppose we're more interested in courses. So we want to know who's taking what courses. If that's the most important thing to count, we'll drop that into values. Again, you're going to start with 29 because there are 29 students that are taking courses, which also means that the course data has no blank entries or anything that's missing. We have all the data, and you can always check by doing this total. Perhaps we're interested in by semester, so we can drop semester into rows, and that gives us each semester and the count for all the different courses. But if we want to know specific courses, right, again, what you're going to want to do is you can start off by dropping the course itself into rows, and then it'll give you specific course counts. Now, suppose we want to know semester that they're taking the courses, we could drop that into columns, and that gives us our information in columns. Okay, so that is how you can create contingency tables in Microsoft Excel. They're called pivot tables. So these are the different ways you can play with it. Try some other options, click on different drop-down menus and see what they do. I'm not going to go into depth in that yet. This is sufficient for what we need at this point, but technology you really can't break. So try playing around with what is going on here. And these are called filters. And you can also play around with the column filters. You could also try throwing in one more variable. So if the pivot table disappears, you can always click on it and you can continue playing with it and trying different things. So I hope that was informative. I hope it was helpful. I hope you find this very interesting. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. And I look forward to helping students with this process. Make sure you go to Unit 2 now and check out the mini project. Unit 3, I apologize for the mini project. And over there, you can start that work. You can do the contingency tables like this in Microsoft Excel. I also recorded a video for RStudio if you want to do it that way for contingency tables. If contingency tables aren't really interesting to you and you like regression better, you can go ahead and do the regression data using the other videos about how to do regression in Microsoft Excel. I will see all of you at the next class and enjoy playing around with the technology.